Catterall vs. Harlem Eubank, a poor sequel to Groves vs. Chris Eubank Jr. It's curious how Harlem Eubank's career has mirrored, at an even lower level, that of his cousin Chris Eubank Jr. Both boxers, despite possessing great physical attributes, athleticism, explosiveness, speed, etc., and the backing of a famous surname, advanced as professionals thanks to tailored matchmaking. Up until past 20 wins, both Eubanks built their careers basically against extremely low-level opponents, veterans, and fighters handpicked for their significant lack of chin, speed or skill. However, eventually, a time comes when fighting non-threatening opponents is no longer justifiable to the public, nor does it provide the economic returns or prestige that can satisfy individuals with the overblown self-worth that the Eubanks suffer from. Thus, inevitably, they have to face an opponent who, even if not in their prime or closer to the end of their career than the beginning, is a true test. That moment arrived for Harlem Eubank on Saturday against his compatriot Jack Catterall, just as it did for Chris Eubank Jr. in 2018 against George Groves. Certainly, it's worth remembering that Eubank Jr. had suffered a previous defeat to Billy Joe Saunders, but it was a very close fight and his performance gained value when Saunders later became world champion. So many remained as convinced of Chris's potential after that fight as they were before it. Just as Harlem Eubank is a worsened version of Chris Eubank Jr., Catterall is also several rungs below where George Groves was. Catterall is a southpaw who, while not a bad boxer, has largely been aided in his career by possessing an awkward style for his opponents combined with optimal physical preparation. Groves, on the other hand, was a good puncher, capable of establishing very solid tactical control, and despite not having the best chin, something that significantly impacted him, he always offered very tough fights in his losses, with the exception of the one before his retirement. He even pushed future Hall of Famer Carl Frog to the brink of disaster twice. In any case, contrary to the idea that Catterall or Groves were just stepping stones to reach their destined place, the Eubanks found that these fighters showed them the reality of their boxing. For anyone who witnessed the WBSS, it's not hard to recall how Groves, through cunning and boxing skill, used his jab and well-timed straight punches to control a much more explosive Eubank Jr. who, weighed down by his overconfidence and technical flaws, found himself unable to achieve decisive results until his opponent dislocated his shoulder in the final round, still failing to avoid a clear defeat. For Harlem Eubank's case, it's not necessary to look back so far. On Saturday, at the Manchester Arena, the southpaw Catterall used sparse straight lefts and jabs to tactically neutralize Eubank who, lacking quality experience and misjudging both his own abilities and his opponent's, was incapable of doing anything more than occasional lunges with hooks that yielded virtually no success. Although Eubank danced around the ring, just like his cousin, without maintaining a solid guard between his occasional offensives, as if he was Roy Jones Jr., the rounds consistently went Catterall's way. Catterall only sustained crucial damage illegally, as a symbol reflecting the difference between what Eubank thinks of his own boxing and reality. It was one of his charges which ended in a terrible headbutt, opening a huge gash over Catterall's right eyebrow. Eubank himself also suffered a serious cut over his right eyebrow, though nowhere near as ghastly as Catterall's. Incredibly, the referee allowed the round to finish and the next, the seventh, to begin. But after moments of confusion, which Eubank is now trying to use to allege foul play and a suspicious stoppage, the scorecards were read, declaring Catterall the victor. Eubank's protests are baseless, regardless of who stopped the fight or advised it. Even if it was his opponent's team, it was unacceptable for the fight to continue with cuts like those sustained, especially Catterall's. Eubank knows this, however, but he refuses to accept that his boxing isn't enough to beat well-prepared top 15 fighters and that what he's seen in his career so far has merely been a mirage created by his promoter, Sauerland. Despite many being dazzled by the Eubanks' physical aptitudes, after Harlem's loss to Catterall and Chris Jr.'s to Groves, it was clear that in boxing, a capable fighter isn't built on press statements, feigned greatness outside the ring, pad work videos, tailored opponents, and mere natural physical qualities. It's through effort, sacrifice, serious training, experience, determination, and realism, often after suffering demoralizing defeats. Catterall had just lost to Barboza, Groves had endured Fraka's comebacks, that a boxer becomes the fighter who can easily deal with opponents with great genetic qualities and significant financial backing, and how a boxer without a famous surname can overcome one who does and make his own name relevant through his own merits. Thanks for watching. More info on our website.